Listen, we're delighted to have our next speaker, who is the oldest son of Phil Robertson and his wife, Miss Kay. I hope many of you got to see the amazing documentary last night, and if not, I encourage you to watch it. It's not a popcorn movie, okay? I mean, it's disturbing in parts, but also something that every American should see, so I encourage you to do that. Well, he lives on the same street as his three bearded brothers. He served as a minister for 22, well, still a minister, but as a pastor at the White's Ferry Road Church in West Monroe, Louisiana. He's authored and co-authored 5 books. He speaks around the country about the reasons behind the success of the TV show and the family's commitment to using that as a platform to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. He and his wife Lisa have been married for over 30 years. And they have also co-authored 2 books themselves, A New Season about their life and marriage, and The Duck Commander devotional for couples. So ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome now to the stage, Alan Robertson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know when you're looking at me, you're saying, that's one of the Duck Dynasty guys, right? Don't I look like a Duck Dynasty guy? You know, it's hard to look this good and be in my family. I just got to be honest with you. People always ask me that, why don't you have a beard? Well, the reason is off stage back there, my wife Lisa. She says her worst nightmare is to wake up, look over, and see someone that looks like my dad or my Uncle Si that's laying next to her. We just came in from Alaska last night, and we were there kind of scouting. We got a big marriage cruise we're doing next year up there in July. And so I ran to this kid came up, and he said, "Are you the beardless brother?" And I said, "Well, I am beardless, and I am a brother. What do you mean? So I made him tell me. He said, "From Duck Dynasty." And it hit me. I thought, who else? I mean, there's billions of beardless brothers all over the world. But I am the most famous, there's no doubt about that, because of our association with the show. And it's a great blessing. I am the only Robertson male that has never been mistaken as homeless, the guy you're looking at here today. It's true. Everyone else has a homeless story. One of my favorites is we went to Nashville. Dad had appeared on a show, and so they were doing this big rollout for the show. And so we go in, and we're at the premiere, and Dad speaks, and it's great. We're so excited because this is far before Duck Dynasty. And so we're excited to be in this setting, in this venue. And so he also got asked to speak at a church the next night. So we go to this large church in Nashville. We get there early, and so, because Dad's motto is, it's better to be an hour early than a minute late, right? So we're there an hour early. We go in. The rest of us are kind of fanning out, looking around the building. Dad goes in, and you saw him last night. I mean, when he's ready to do his thing and then hit the road and get in the duck blind. That's what he does. By the way, he's in the duck blind this morning, just so you know. He did make it back like he said he would. So anyway, he's there, and he's sitting on the front row. He's ready to speak. He's got his tattered Bible, same one he had last night. It's the duct tapes all around it. He looked like he did then. Nothing's changed in 25 years, by the way. What you see is what you get. And so this deacon comes in. He didn't know he'd been invited there to speak, and he sees this guy sitting on the front row and looking sort of haggard and with a long beard and in tattered camo. And he goes down and he says, "Hey." And pats him on the shoulder, and Dad's looking at him like, "What's wrong with this cat?" He's got that look on his face. He said, "We're so glad you're here tonight." And he said, "Yeah, glad to be here." He said, "Well, look, I just want to tell you, if you're hungry, we've got some food out in the back. And when we're through tonight, when our speaker is finished, we'd love to talk to you more. And there's a wonderful shelter right around the corner with a nice warm bed in it." True story. So Dad just nods and doesn't say anything. So all these people start coming in. And I mean, there's probably 3,000 people there that night. We all come back in. And this deacon, who is so friendly and nice and just reaching out, has no idea. And Dad gets up to speak, and he's mortified. And so, you think Dad's not going to throw him under the bus, but Dad said, "Hey, I came in here and some cat said the homeless shelter's around the corner, Jack. You better get around there." You never know, right? I wish tonight or this morning I could just share with you some great stories from our family and the blessing that God has given us to make an impact about America. But you know, we're at a time, a perilous time, where from positions of power, I don't know that in my lifetime I've ever seen more of an attack on traditional values, traditional family, and really religious liberty. That's where we're living today. Every time that I come and speak for anything associated with FRC or with Tony, I get the most vile, vicious, mean notes on my social platform that you can ever imagine. Because I'm a person, obviously, it's in the public eye, a part of our family, and so we're not supposed to talk about what we talk about, who we are, in essence. I guess, you know, it's okay for other people, but not so much for us. And so we're blasted. And you know, it's interesting because you think, well, you know, why do you keep coming back and coming to events like this and talking about it or talking about it in interviews and take this abuse? Well, one is because Tony Perkins is a really convincing guy, you know, and he keeps convincing me to come back, and I really like him. But there's really three reasons why I continue to do what I do. One is that I don't run from a fight, especially when I'm right. And we're right about what we're talking about. And so we don't need to run from that. You know, as Dad said last night, ultimately our conscience and who we are, those of us who are believers know that God has put us in this position on this earth to be a mouthpiece for Him in whatever role we are. And you don't have to be a pastor, and you don't have to be a preacher, or you don't even have to be a prophet to be able to do that. You just have to be compelled for the right reasons. We have just in America, we have over 300 years of history on our side and success. Because this country was founded on the things we believe in. And we should be able to talk about that consistently and not be maligned. But we are. But you know what? That's okay. Because God also told us that we would be persecuted for living that godly life and speaking what we speak. If Jesus Christ, if it was good enough for Him to be persecuted, then it's good enough for me. And I'm not going to back away from the fight. I also want to join and support those who are willing to fight this cultural war for our soul. And that's what it is a fight for the soul of America. Because we know that we're citizens of this great country, and we're very proud of that, but we're also citizens of another country, of some place that's higher, some place that we want all men and women to ascend to. And really that's the third reason why, is because I love the folks, even the ones who malign and talk bad and hate and say the things that they say. Whether they hate me, I love them anyway. And I want them to know about eternal life. I want them to know there's something beyond. I want them to know there's something better for your family right here in the here and now. A life that's unimaginable when turned to Christ and turned to God. And so those are some of the reasons why that I'm continually willing to speak out, to come to great events like this and say, you know what? We need to stay the course and fight the fight. And now more than ever. I remember when I became politically aware, I was 11 years old. Dad had just come out of the haze and the fog of the 60s, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And he had just become a brand new Christian. And so now, of course, he's kind of seeing it for the first time about how God opens his eyes up to see it. But he was really politically unaware, and so was Mom. They had never really paid attention. They had never really gotten involved. My grandparents, who helped us start Duck Commander, were living next door. Now, they were blue dog Democrats from that day. You know, in the South, especially in Louisiana, a lot of folks, even though they were conservative, were Democrat because that was the only way they could vote in a lot of local elections and be able to do that. So that's what they were. But, you know, I never heard my grandpa say anything good about the Democrats, even though he was a Democrat, which really surprised me. He called them Demerats, is what he called them. And so I grew up, I heard him, you know, talking about it, and he continued to vote Republican, and I just kept thinking, that's so strange. You know, he's a Democrat, but doesn't seem to like it. So I'm 11 years old, and, you know, you don't really know what you are yet because you've got a few years before you can vote. But I remember it was 40 years ago, almost to the month, in November of 1976, Carter had just won the election. My dad, at this time, he's a brand new Christian. He's teaching in a Christian school, and so he's kind of, you know, finding his path. And they announced on the radio, because, you know, back in those days, there was no, you know, cable, so you had to wait and hear and find out the next day what happened. And so we're driving into school. I'm 11 years old, and they announced that Jimmy Carter's won the presidency, and they started playing "The South's Gonna Do It Again" by Leonard Skinner on the radio. Well, Dad, being, a redneck from Louisiana, he's singing along and tapping the top of the, dash as we're going along. I said, well, I guess I'm a Democrat because Dad seems to be happy about this Jimmy Carter. Well, that wasn't until he took office and started being president. Then every day at the dinner table, I would hear my grandpa and dad discuss how Jimmy Carter was not so great, for America. Then I thought, well, I wonder if I'm a Democrat at all. I'm trying to figure this out. What am I supposed to be? Because, when you're this age, 11, 12, 13, you're just going off of what your parents tell you and what you talk about. And then along came this guy in 1980 named Ronald Reagan. By now, I'm a little bit older, and so I'm beginning to be aware myself, and everybody's starting to pay attention because the country was in such bad shape. And you start listening to this guy, and I became inspired. Now, in 1980, I wasn't old enough to vote, but I was old enough to be inspired by this man who had a vision for America. What was interesting is this man had not always been this conservative icon that he had become, but of course, at one point in his life, he had been very liberal. And he had evolved to this point to be this man for this time, and it seemed like he was chosen for it. Through his presidency, I became more inspired, not just because the country was rallying in a great way, but because I saw someone who finally had a great vision for America and a vision for a young teenager like me. So in 1984, I turned 18 in 1983, and I couldn't wait to get down to register to vote. Mom and Dad had still, even though they had finally become engaged, had not registered to vote. And so when I turned 18, my request to them for my birthday present, because we didn't have much going on in 1983, but my request is that they would register to vote and that they would register Republican with me. And they did. And so I cast my first vote in 1984 for President Reagan. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. And so when I look back and I see that and I realize my own awareness and being engaged and involved in politics, and also, of course, being a pastor for many years, and I realized that part of the shutdown by pastors was that, the left was trying to say you can't talk about this in those settings, and unfortunately, a lot of pastors bought into that lie. And so they quit talking about it because they were, you're not supposed to talk about that sort of thing in here. I never bought into that. Because God has raised us up to make a difference in our culture. And that also means in our churches, because look, you got to get out of the pews and into the public because that's where it's happening. And so that's the message that I began to tell other pastors. Don't be afraid. When Governor Jindal was running for governor, his people were asking people around the state if he could come and share his testimony. No political discussion, just I want to share what God has done to change me. And you would not believe pastor after pastor said, I don't really want to get political. I don't want to do that. And so they came to me and I said, absolutely. We would love to have Mr. Jindal, come in and speak. And at this time, he wasn't governor yet. And he got up and gave about a 15-minute version of his testimony when he came to Christ. It was powerful. He never said, vote for me. He didn't have to say it. He talked about what God had done to change him and his wife. We became good friends after that. And you know what he did after all of his terms while he was in governor in Louisiana? On any given Sunday, he was around our state giving his testimony as a sitting governor. And again, not to say, here's my party, here's my platform, here's what you do for me. He was just telling what God had done in his life. We need more men and women like that in public office who are willing to do and talk about what Christ has done. So we're at this point again. It hasn't taken us too long to get here, where things are in pretty bad shape. In fact, it's at such a crossroads that I believe, as many have said on this stage during this week, that we're at a topple point. It's so dangerous and it's so scary. Some of the decisions that we see that come down through the judiciary now and through the Supreme Court, of course, what's happening and mostly not happening through the legislative branch. In 2016, we're at a crucial moment. And I believe we're at a clear choice as well. Now, we've got same old coming in on the Democratic side. I mean, it's so, in fact, the only thing that adds to it now is we got a person we know how self-serving she is. And not only wanting to take forward what's been happening for the last 8 years, but also then to serve her own interest. It's a clear choice. Because you look on the other side and you see a man who we're not sure about, because he's never been a politician, which could exactly be the answer we need, that God has raised up this person for this moment, and that's in this time. But here's what I appreciate about Donald Trump, and me just watching for the last couple of years, just like all of you, to sort of see this man and find out more about him. He's evolving in the right direction. He talks openly about where he was, and certainly the news media is going to put out there every possible thing they can find about where he was. But he's telling you about where he's coming to. And so again, I'm not saying he's the next Ronald Reagan, but I'm saying he has a lot of the qualities of a person that evolved from one place to another place because they see how bad America has gotten. And so if you're asking me what choice I would make in that, to see same old, go forward in the same ways with the same things that, in my opinion, are ruining our great country, versus a guy who's evolving in the right direction, who has none of the baggage of coming in as all these political favors, but instead is something totally new, I'm clearly going to vote for Donald Trump in 2 months. There's no doubt about it. I'm going to be that guy. And to my fellow Christians, evangelicals, and those who have said, I made up my decision in the primary, because, I supported someone else. A lot of us did. But when it comes down to it, we say, if I were a never Trump, I would hope that person would have been a never Hillary far before they were a never Trump. So you've drawn that line in the sand, and you say, well, I just don't know if my conscience will allow me to step over it. Well, I hope you drew another line that was never Hillary before that. So let's wipe that off and let's go back. And let's remember and look at what's going to happen if we don't do the right thing. I love what Dr. Dobson said last night. We can't quit now. We can't just say, well, you know what, maybe if we lose this election then and start looking for 4 years down the road. We're running out of 4-year terms for our great country. The judicial is waiting. The legislative is waiting. It's up to us to do the right thing. It's so crucial at this moment and at this time. I want to encourage all of you to trust in God's ability to raise up who He raises up. And that doesn't always be the person in our mind that we think it should be. God has done amazing things throughout human history by raising up people that no one could imagine to make a difference. We marvel in our own family. You saw my dad here last night. And I said he looks like John the Baptist, or what I guess John the Baptist would have looked like. He looks strange, he eats strange things, and he points people to Jesus. That sounds a lot like John the Baptist to me, right? And yet you heard the passion and the power of his presentation, those of you that saw Torchbearer. And by the way, Torchbearer is a great reminder of what has happened civilization after civilization after civilization when we allow men to determine the value and worth of your life and mine. And yet that is the exact trajectory that our country is on. Secularizing, taking morality out of the equation, and eventually we will get the blame. That's what's happened in every culture, in every civilization. As it begins to topple, it becomes the godly that get the blame. Happens over and over. But you know what? After these thousands of years, you know who's still here? You know who's still here? And another thing, pushing forward, the believers of God are saying we still know the answer. When He comes back, we're still going to be here. And I would love it if our great country was here as well. But for that to happen, we're going to have to step up. We're going to have to not be afraid, and we're going to have to make a difference. Thank you for what you do. It's been a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you.
One man come here to justify, one man to